I would definitely call the opioid epidemic a crisis in Washington, D.C. Between 2014 and 2019 year to date, we've seen over 1,000 deaths due to opioid overdoses. Roughly 65% of all opioid overdoses came from wards 5, 7, and 8. And those can be anything from prescription opioids to illicit. So you're talking about your heroin and fentanyl related drugs.
I started lacing my marijuana with crack. Eventually, that didn't do it for me anymore, so I tried heroin, started snorting. I never shot it up, just snorted. I always wanted that high that I felt from the beginning, and plain marijuana didn't do it anymore. So I eventually graduated to something harder.
Opioids are basically pain medications, commonly referred to or based as morphine. And they come from an opiate derivative or from a natural plant. Percocet, Vicodin, Oxycontin, oxycodone are names that people are very familiar with. About 4 or 5 years ago, the mixture changed in that a synthetic was added to it called fentanyl. And fentanyl is a very potent synthetic that's about 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. You can actually put enough fentanyl in 10 suitcases to kill everybody in this country because it only takes a few grains added now to marijuana or to cocaine or even to K2.
We're seeing people being employed in China and in Mexico that are manufacturing a lot of this stuff, and it's relatively inexpensive to make and to sell. Folks that have used heroin for years and years and years don't know that they're getting fentanyl in their heroin, or they're getting fentanyl, and then they can have a real crisis because their body's not able to handle it.
I've seen a guy sit right next to me on the bed. I'm in the bedroom and we're talking, then he just said, "Oh, I'm gonna stretch out for a minute." I said, "Okay." He stretched out, he never woke up.
One of the things that we do is the Narcan deployment to the patrol folks in an effort to save people who are experiencing overdoses. The second thing is we have units that are dedicated to just finding people that are selling heroin and other dangerous drugs on the street. And then we have partnerships with our federal law enforcement folks, the FBI, Drug Enforcement Administration, that are trying to make efforts to stem the flow of drugs from where they're originating into the District of Columbia.
There's a different level of stigma based on patients who are addicted to so-called street drugs like heroin and fentanyl, as opposed to a medication or pill that the doctor prescribed. And then there really shouldn't be, because they have the same basic underlying problem in that there may be a genetic component to addictions.
It took away a level of anxiety that I had and some issues, from my childhood with my mom. And that particular drug, especially an opioid, makes one feel loved. It's a very warm feeling.
What we know is that in this population, at least 50% suffer from anxiety or depression. And then it goes up, so you have patients who may have schizophrenia or bipolar or some more serious mental health problem.
I went into a mental health crisis house because along with having the addiction, I have mental illness, which I have bipolar 1.
We now know that medication-assisted treatment, as opposed to an abstinence-only model, is the best treatment.
The great thing is youth are not really dying of opioids overdoses in the district, and so that's a really great thing, and that's one of the main things that we talk about that's different between DC and the rest of the country.
Today's generation is much different. Heroin is much different, the value is much different, the quality is much different. You have to be really careful with it. I wouldn't suggest nobody, because you don't never know what's in it. You just don't know.